Payton Pritchard has never been shy about what he believes this Boston Celtics team can do, but his latest message hits harder than usual. While much of the league expects Boston to fade quietly into the background after losing cornerstone pieces and seeing Jayson Tatum sidelined with a ruptured Achilles, Pritchard is demanding that the conversation shift. He understands that from the outside, the narrative will be one of decline, of a team taking a step back, but inside the locker room the tone is entirely different. He insists that the standard has not dropped and never will. That is the essence of what he sees as the culture of Boston, one where even in moments of uncertainty, the city and the players only speak the language of championships. The 2024 championship banner is still fresh, yet the memory of falling to New York in the following postseason still burns. That loss, coupled with the devastating injury to Tatum, forced front office decisions that were not only about basketball, but about survival within the financial structure of the league. Jrue Holiday was moved, Kristaps Porzingis followed, and the roster looks dramatically different from the one that stormed through opponents with 64 wins in a regular season and a 16-3 playoff run on the way to the 18th title. To outsiders it might feel like a dismantling, but for Pritchard is simply the next chapter, a reshaping that does not change the mission. In his words, there is no such thing as a sabbatical year, no such thing as a pause button in Boston. He reminds everyone that champions cannot afford to wait, and he frames this coming season not as a step backward, but as an opportunity to prove a point. For him, the challenge is fuel. He knows the expectations across the country are muted, but he also knows that the very same doubt creates space for Boston to strike when no one is prepared. The intriguing part of his message is how it shifts the spotlight back onto himself. Pritchard is no longer simply the spark plug off the bench. Coming off a season where he claimed the 6th Man of the Year award with averages of 14 points per game, shooting over 40% from beyond the arc and close to 85% from the free throw line, he has now positioned himself as a central piece in keeping the Celtics relevant during Tatum's absence. Those numbers, when you look closely, speak to more than efficiency. They reveal a player who can stretch defenses, force mismatches, and dictate tempo in ways that go beyond traditional scoring. If Boston is to stay competitive at the highest level, his consistency will be non-negotiable. Yet what Pritchard seems to understand better than most is that this season is not only about survival. It is about setting the tone for the future of the Tatum and Jaylen Brown era. Every possession without their leading superstar becomes a chance to build resilience, to discover new hierarchies, and to test which supporting cast members can handle the weight of championship expectations. The irony is that the lowered external pressure may actually liberate the roster. With fewer eyes demanding perfection, they can craft a new identity built on depth, toughness, and the relentless energy of players like Pritchard. For Celtics fans, the question becomes less about whether Boston can repeat the exact blueprint of 2 years ago, and more about how the team can evolve into something equally dangerous, but less predictable. Pritchard's insistence on never accepting the concept of a gap year is not empty bravado. It reflects the confidence of someone who's already stared down the biggest moments and delivered. He knows that the East is never stable, that injuries and surprises rewrite the script every season, and that Boston's ability to survive early storms could position them perfectly for a late run when few expected. The story of 2025 and 2026 will not be about what Boston has lost, but about what emerges in the vacuum. Pritchard is betting on himself to be one of those revelations. The city, the fan base, and the league may have their doubts, but he's calling for patience, for belief, and for faith in the culture that has carried this franchise through every generation. In his voice, there is no hesitation. For him, Boston remains a contender because Boston refuses to be anything else. Boston Celtics stand at the edge of one of the most unusual stretches in recent franchise history, a season that defies simple labels. 14 months after raising a championship banner and seemingly opening the door to a new dynasty, the team now faces an unexpected twist. Jayson Tatum, the face of the organization and one of the most dominant players in the league, has been sidelined with a torn Achilles tendon. His absence will shape not only the upcoming campaign, but also the long-term direction of the franchise. For many, this situation has been described as a sabbatical year. Yet that term risks underestimating the complexity of what Boston is about to experience. A sabbatical often implies rest, leisure, or even a strategic pause. But in professional basketball, time never truly stops. Every season carries consequences that ripple far beyond the present, influencing contracts, rotations, chemistry, and the psychology of a roster. What the Celtics are entering is less a pause and more a recalibration, a liminal state where the future of the franchise is quietly being rewritten. The absence of Tatum changes everything, but not necessarily for the worse. Without the weight of immediate championship expectations, management gains rare freedom to experiment. Decisions regarding rotations, minutes, and roster construction can now be guided not solely by short-term necessity, but by long-term vision. Young players who might otherwise have remained in limited roles will now face opportunities to expand their games. Veterans will be challenged to carry responsibilities once shouldered by Tatum, and in doing so, the team may uncover strengths and dynamics previously hidden. The concept of a step backward in sports is often misleading. History offers reminders that forced pauses can become launching pads. Michael Jordan's temporary absence in 1990s forced the Chicago Bulls to adjust and reimagine their structure, which later contributed to the dominance that followed. Kevin Durant's Achilles injury in 2019 reshaped the perception of his career, only for him to return as one of the league's most lethal scorers. The Celtics now stand in a similar position, confronted with adversity, but armed with the chance to emerge stronger. Financially and strategically, the upcoming season could prove decisive. Every contract decision and draft choice will now be evaluated through the lens of a future where Tatum returns at full strength. Moves that might have been avoided under the pressure of immediate contention suddenly become possible. Risk-taking, experimentation, and development will define the Celtics' approach. Far from being wasted time, this so-called sabbatical could serve as the laboratory for the team's next era of dominance. The narrative, therefore, is not one of decline, but of transition. Jaylen Brown will likely be thrust into the spotlight as the primary engine of the offense, a role that could accelerate his evolution as a leader. Players such as Payton Pritchard and Sam Hauser, once considered secondary pieces, may carry expanded responsibilities that test and refine their ceilings. Even mid-season acquisitions, names not yet tied to Boston in trade speculation, could shift the balance of the roster in ways that reshape the Celtics' identity moving forward. Seen through this lens, the season without Tatum is not an empty chapter but a hidden one, a chapter whose significance will only be understood when the full story is revealed. The Celtics may not dominate the standings in 2025 and 2026, but they are setting the foundation for dominance in the years ahead. Boston's path is uncertain, yet it is precisely within uncertainty that possibility thrives. This is not a lost year. It is the silent forging of the future, a year that could be remembered as the turning point when the Celtics transformed adversity into opportunity, preparing for a horizon that could be brighter than anything the franchise has seen since the glory of the 1980s. Ben Simmons may already have chosen his next destination in the NBA, and the city he could be calling home might be Boston. According to Ryan Russillo of The Ringer, Simmons has already made up his mind about where he will play next. During a recent podcast episode featuring rapper Freddie Gibbs, Russillo casually dropped a line that sent shockwaves across the basketball community. When Simmons' name came up, Russillo did not hesitate. He simply said Simmons is in Boston right now. The reaction was immediate. Gibbs looked stunned and asked for confirmation, only to receive another calm yes from Russillo. It was not the kind of playful rumor one expects from anonymous accounts or speculative blogs. It was a statement from a voice with decades of credibility inside NBA circles, someone who worked at ESPN and later became one of the most respected analysts at The Ringer. That matters because Russillo is known to have close relationships with executives, agents, and front office decision-makers. If he is suggesting Simmons has already placed himself in Boston, there is reason to believe this is more than just a throwaway comment. The question then becomes what exactly Boston sees in Simmons and why such a move could make sense at this very specific moment in franchise history. Simmons is not arriving with the shine of a superstar who dominated highlight reels. His years after leaving Philadelphia have been defined by hesitation, inconsistency, and missed opportunities. At 29 years old with 7 seasons of experience, he is no longer the young prodigy expected to redefine the position. Yet the Celtics may not be looking for a savior. They may be looking for a piece that perfectly fits an intricate puzzle. Consider the landscape. Boston enters the 2025 to 2026 campaign under unique circumstances. The team is balancing the absence of Jayson Tatum due to a serious Achilles injury while also trying to preserve the championship core that was built with patience and precision. Adding a player like Simmons would not require the franchise to surrender draft capital or absorb a crippling contract. Instead, it represents a low-cost gamble with the possibility of an extraordinary reward. Defensively, Simmons still carries the pedigree of a two-time all-defensive selection. His size at 6 feet 10 inches combined with the versatility to switch across positions could give coach Joe Mazzulla a new tool for matchups that have historically been problematic. Boston has thrived when it could unleash defensive versatility, and Simmons embodies that idea. He can pressure ball handlers, guard wings, and even provide relief minutes against taller forwards. In a playoff series, those extra possessions matter. On offense, the narrative has always been about his reluctance to shoot, but Boston may not care about that. The Celtics are one of the deepest shooting teams in the league. What they lack is someone who can bend the defense without requiring touches as a scorer. Simmons excels as a connector, a ball mover who collapses defenses simply by driving to the rim. Imagine defenders sagging off him only to watch Boston's shooters get cleaner looks because of the rotations he forces. Used as a screener and secondary playmaker, he could function like a bigger, more dynamic version of Luke Cornett. There is also the human element. Boston has become known as an environment that rehabilitates careers. Veterans who were written off elsewhere have rediscovered their confidence wearing green. Simmons may be searching for exactly that kind of setting, a place with structure, championship expectations, and a roster that does not need him to be a star, but values what he still does at an elite level. The risk is minimal. If the experiment fails, the Celtics can simply move on by the next summer with little consequence. If it succeeds, the upside is immense. Simmons could rebuild his market value, and in the process, Boston could find itself with a rotation piece who thrives under the brightest lights. In that case, he would have every reason to remain with the franchise that revived his career. The rumor may remain only a whisper for now, but the logic behind it is undeniable. When a respected insider like Russillo drops a hint this bold, it forces the league to pay attention. The idea of Simmons in Boston raises more questions than it answers, but that is precisely what makes it fascinating. What does Simmons know that has not yet been made public, and what conversations are happening behind closed doors in the Celtics organization? If this story takes shape, the NBA could soon witness one of the most unexpected comebacks of the decade, and Boston could be the stage where it all unfolds.